London, 1875. Zara Covington gripped the letter with trembling hands, reading once more the words that sealed her fate. The bank's final notice, penned in cold, formal script, confirmed what she had feared for months: her late father's debts had consumed every last shilling of their modest estate. By week's end, she and her younger sister would be without a home. "Is it as terrible as you feared?" Eleanor asked, her 16-year-old face pale with worry. Zara folded the letter carefully, tucking away her panic behind a composed smile. "Nothing we cannot manage, dearest. Father always said a Covington faces adversity with dignity." She turned to gaze out the window of their small Chelsea townhouse, the last vestige of what had once been a comfortable life. The London season was in full bloom, carriages rolling past with young debutantes in silks and satins, while she stood in a twice-mended dress, contemplating a future as someone's governess or companion. "At least you still have Lord Pembroke's invitation to Lady Hertford's ball tomorrow," Eleanor offered hopefully. Perhaps nothing," Zara interrupted, more sharply than intended. "Lord Pembroke extended that invitation when he believed Father's shipping investments were merely delayed. He'll withdraw it the moment the Gazette publishes notice of our insolvency." The truth Zara couldn't bear to share with her sister was simpler and more painful: love, marriage, security, these were luxuries reserved for women with either beauty or fortune. At 27, with her unremarkable features and now without a penny to her name, she had neither. She had seen too many women destroyed by romantic notions, her own mother included, who had withered away from heartbreak after her father's constant infidelities. "I will not become mother," she whispered to herself, renewing the vow that had guided her since girlhood. Love was a gamble for fools and dreamers. Security, that was what mattered. That night, Zara made her decision. She would attend Lady Hertford's ball, her last appearance in society, not to dance or flirt, but to secure a position. Several of the matrons in attendance employed companions. It wasn't the future she had envisioned, but it would keep Eleanor from destitution. The ballroom of Hertford House blazed with hundreds of candles, their light catching on jewels and polished silver. Zara stood at its periphery, her emerald gown, the last decent dress she owned, marking her as someone who still belonged, though she felt like an imposter. "Miss Covington, what a delightful surprise." Lord Pembroke appeared beside her, his florid face betraying his surprise at her attendance. "I had heard, well, there have been whispers." "Yes, I imagine there have been," Zara replied evenly. "If you'll excuse me, I must speak with Lady Harriston about a matter of some importance." Before she could move away, the crowd parted for a latecomer. Conversations hushed momentarily as a tall man entered the ballroom. He wore no jewels or decorations, his evening clothes impeccably tailored but unadorned. Yet something in his bearing commanded attention, the way he surveyed the room with cool detachment, as though measuring its worth and finding it wanting. "Who is that?" she asked, curiosity momentarily displacing her anxieties. Lord Pembroke followed her gaze. "No one of consequence. Some colonial gentleman newly returned from abroad. Rumor has it he made his fortune in mining or some such vulgar enterprise." The stranger's gaze landed on her, lingering for a moment too long. Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks and quickly looked away. When she glanced back, he had vanished into the crowd. An hour later, having suffered thinly-veiled rejections from 3 potential employers, Zara retreated to the relative quiet of a small anteroom. The night had been a humiliating failure. Tomorrow, the creditors would come. "You appear to be hiding," came a deep voice from the shadows. Zara startled, turning to find the stranger from earlier watching her with undisguised interest. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 35, with features too severe to be handsome, a strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the dim light. "Sir, propriety dictates we should be introduced before conversing," she replied stiffly. A faint smile touched his lips. "Propriety? Yes, I found London to be excessively concerned with such matters. I am Richard Ashworth." He offered no title, no connections, confirmation of Lord Pembroke's assessment. A self-made man, then. Untitled. Unconnected. Miss Zara Covington, she replied, with a curtsy so slight it bordered on insulting. You're in trouble, he stated simply. She stiffened. I beg your pardon. Financial trouble. It's written in the tension around your eyes, the way you've been approaching the dowagers all evening. He leaned against the door frame. Would it help to know that each of those women rejected you because your father borrowed money from their husbands? The bluntness of his assessment felt like a physical blow. You are unspeakably rude, Mr. Ashworth. I prefers direct. Rude would be mentioning that your dress, while beautifully maintained, is at least 3 seasons old. Zara moved to brush past him, but he continued speaking, his voice softening. I require a wife, Miss Covington. She stopped, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. A wife. I find myself in need of one, and time constraints prevent the usual courtship rituals. Are you mad, or merely unforgivably improper? Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Neither. I am practical. I need a wife of reasonable intelligence and good breeding. You need financial salvation. I've made discreet inquiries, your reputation is spotless, your education excellent. I offer marriage, with generous terms. He reached into his coat and extracted a folded document, holding it out to her. My proposal, in writing. I will settle your father's debts immediately. Your sister will have a dowry sufficient to make an excellent match. You will want for nothing material. Zara didn't take the paper. You must think me desperate indeed. I think you practical, he countered. Like myself. And what do you gain from this arrangement with a penniless nobody? Something flickered in his eyes, was it amusement? Social entree. Despite my fortune, certain doors remain closed to me. A well-bred wife opens them. So you would purchase me, like one of your colonial mines. The words tasted bitter. I would offer you a partnership? Read the terms, Miss Covington. I will call tomorrow at noon for your answer. He placed the document on a small table. Oh, and should you refuse, I've included a letter of recommendation for a position as companion to my aunt in Bath. The salary is modest but fair. Before she could respond, he bowed and was gone, leaving Zara alone with a choice no woman should have to make. Dawn found Zara still awake, Richard Ashworth's proposal spread before her on her small writing desk. The terms were unexpectedly generous, more than generous. Beyond settling her father's debts and providing for Eleanor, he offered her a substantial personal allowance and complete autonomy in running his household. Only one paragraph gave her pause. This marriage will be one of mutual respect and companionship. I do not seek romantic attachment, nor do I expect it. Heirs will eventually be necessary, but I propose we approach that matter with the same practical arrangement that defines our union. Zara? Eleanor appeared in her doorway, still in her night-dress. Have you been awake all night? What is that? Zara quickly gathered the papers. A possible solution to our difficulties. By noon, she had made her decision. When Richard Ashworth arrived at her modest home, she received him in the parlor, her back straight, her resolve firm. You've considered my offer, he said, removing his hat. I have terms of my own, Zara replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. My sister will live with us until she marries. I will have final say in household matters. And... She hesitated, we will maintain separate bedrooms until such time as heirs become a priority. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed his face. Agreed, with one amendment. We will present ourselves as a conventional marriage in all public matters. Private arrangements are our business alone. Zara nodded stiffly. Then I accept your proposal, Mr. Ashworth. Richard, he corrected. If we are to be married in 3 days' time, you should use my given name. 3 days, she gasped. Time is of the essence. The creditors will not wait, and I have business requiring my attention outside London soon. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. This makes it official, I believe. Inside was a simple gold band set with a single diamond. No ornate setting, no family crest, further evidence of his common origins. "It is lovely," she said automatically. "It is practical," he countered. "Like our arrangement." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Zara felt a strange sensation, not the romantic flutter young girls dreamed of, but something more complex. Relief, yes, but also a disquieting awareness of his proximity, the warmth of his hand against hers. She withdrew her fingers quickly. "This is a business arrangement," she reminded herself aloud. "Precisely," Richard agreed, though something in his expression suggested he found her reaction amusing. "I'll send my solicitor this afternoon with the necessary papers. The wedding will be private, the register office, with only your sister and my man of business as witnesses." After he departed, Zara stood motionless in the center of the parlor, the weight of the ring unfamiliar on her finger. She had done what was necessary. Sentiment was a luxury she could not afford. This marriage would provide security, nothing more. Love, after all, was for those who had never seen its destructive power firsthand. The wedding was exactly as promised, brief, businesslike, and utterly devoid of sentiment. Eleanor wept quietly throughout the ceremony, though whether from relief at their salvation or dismay at the coldness of the proceedings, Zara couldn't tell. "You may kiss your bride," the officiant prompted at the conclusion. Richard looked at her with that same inscrutable expression, then leaned forward and pressed his lips briefly to her forehead. "Welcome to our partnership, Mrs. Ashworth." Their new home, she discovered that afternoon, was a handsome townhouse in Belgravia, far grander than she had expected for a colonial businessman, with a full complement of well-trained servants who greeted her with practiced deference. "Your chambers are through here, madam," the housekeeper, Mrs. Fleming, explained, leading her to an elegantly appointed suite. "Mr. Ashworth thought you might wish to rest before dinner." "And Mr. Ashworth's rooms?" Zara inquired, attempting to sound casual. "The master suite is at the opposite end of the corridor, madam." Zara nodded, relieved. He had honored their agreement. That evening, she dined with her new husband and sister in a dining room that could have comfortably seated 20. The silence was oppressive until Eleanor, always the bolder of the sisters, ventured a question. "Will we remain in London for the season, Mr. Ashworth?" Richard looked up from his plate. "We leave for Northumberland in 2 days." "Northumberland?" Zara echoed. "You mentioned business outside London, but I had no idea you meant so far north." "My primary estate is there," he replied. "Ashworth Park." "An estate?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "Is it very large?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Large enough." "But what of your business interests?" Zara pressed. "I understood you were recently returned from abroad." "My business can be managed through correspondence for a time." He turned his attention back to his meal. "The northern air will be beneficial for your sister's health." Eleanor had always been delicate, prone to winter coughs in London's sooty air, but Zara was startled that he had noticed or considered this. "How thoughtful," she murmured, studying him with new curiosity. As the days passed, Zara found herself increasingly puzzled by her husband. He was unfailingly courteous but remote, spending long hours in his study with correspondence. Yet occasionally she would catch him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Their journey north began in a private railway carriage more luxurious than any Zara had travelled in before. Eleanor exclaimed over the passing countryside, but Zara's attention was drawn to the leather portfolio Richard had open on his lap, filled with architectural drawings. "Are those building plans?" she inquired. He glanced up, seeming surprised at her interest. "Renovations for the east wing at Ashworth Park. The previous owner allowed it to fall into disrepair." "Previous owner? Then it's not your family home." Something shifted in his expression. "No. I acquired it 5 years ago. It must have been expensive to purchase an estate of that size. I have been fortunate in my investments." He hesitated, then turned the portfolio toward her. "Perhaps you would care to offer an opinion on the library designs." Your father's collection suggested you appreciate good books. The conversation that followed was the longest they had shared since their wedding, a detailed discussion of library layouts, reading light, and the merits of various woods for shelving. For the first time, Zara glimpsed something beyond the cool, practical businessman, a man with definite tastes, strong opinions, and surprising knowledge of architecture and design. As twilight fell, they passed through increasingly wild countryside. Eleanor had fallen asleep against the window when Richard broke a long silence. "You must have questions about our arrangement," he said quietly. Zara met his gaze. "Several thousand, in fact." That unexpected admission drew a genuine smile from him, the first she had seen. It transformed his severe features, softening the hard lines of his face. "Yet you agreed to marry a virtual stranger." "As did you," she pointed out. "I knew considerably more about you than you did about me," he countered. "Your father's financial troubles began 3 years ago, accelerating after his investment in the doomed Franklin shipping venture. Despite your reduced circumstances, you maintained your sister's education and refused 2 marriage offers from men of questionable character but substantial means." Zara stiffened. "You investigated me. I researched a potential partnership. You would have done the same, had you the resources." He leaned forward slightly. "What would you like to know, Zara?" The use of her given name startled her. "Why me? There must be dozens of impoverished gentlewomen in London more beautiful or accomplished. Beauty fades. Accomplishments are largely ornamental. I wanted intelligence, resilience, and pragmatism." His dark eyes held hers. "You maintained dignity in impossible circumstances. You prioritized your sister's welfare above romantic notions. When faced with my proposal, you negotiated terms rather than swooning or expressing moral outrage. You make me sound calculating. I consider it a compliment. Calculation requires thought, and thought requires intelligence." He sat back. "We are alike, you and I. We see the world as it is, not as poets and dreamers wish it to be." "Is that why you specified a marriage without romantic attachment?" she asked boldly. Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of some emotion she couldn't identify. "I believe in clarity of expectations. Romance breeds disappointment." Before she could respond, the train began to slow. "Ah," Richard said, looking out the window. "We've arrived." The carriage waiting at the small rural station bore no crest or insignia, but the matched greys pulling it spoke of considerable wealth. As they traveled the winding country road in darkness, Zara could make out little of their surroundings beyond the sweep of hills against the night sky. It was only when they crested a final hill that Ashworth Park revealed itself, and Zara gasped involuntarily. Spread below them, illuminated by dozens of lamps, stood not the comfortable country house she had imagined, but a vast ancestral seat that rivaled any of the great homes of England. Classical in design, its pale stone facade stretched majestically across formal gardens, with a central dome that caught the moonlight. "That is Ashworth Park." Eleanor breathed, now fully awake. "It is," Richard confirmed, watching Zara's face closely. "But it's enormous," Zara said, her mind racing. "The staff required for such a property, the expense of maintaining it, this is not the home of a mere businessman, however successful." Richard's expression remained unreadable. "No, it is not." A line of servants awaited them on the grand steps, headed by an elderly butler whose dignity seemed carved from the same stone as the house itself. "Welcome home, Your Grace," the butler intoned, bowing deeply. "The household is assembled to greet the new Duchess." Zara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Your Grace," she repeated faintly. Eleanor clutched her arm. "Zara, what does he mean?" Richard, or whoever he truly was, extended his arm to her. "May I present Her Grace, the Duchess of Northcote," he announced to the assembled staff. "My wife." The servants bowed or curtsied in unison as Zara stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. "You are the Duke of Northcote," she finally managed, her voice barely audible. "I am," he confirmed, his voice taking on a new authority. "And you, Zara, are my Duchess." The revelation struck Zara like a physical blow. The Duke of Northcote was one of England's most powerful peers, a reclusive figure whose enormous wealth and political influence were the stuff of legend. And she had married him without the slightest idea of his identity. She made it through the formal introductions in a daze, nodding mechanically as an endless procession of servants greeted her with practiced deference. Eleanor, after one shocked glance at her sister, recovered more quickly, her natural charm carrying her through the awkwardness. It was only when they reached the Duchess's chambers, a palatial suite decorated in shades of blue and gold, that Zara's composure finally broke. "How dare you?" she demanded, whirling on her husband the moment the door closed behind them. "You deliberately deceived me." Richard, no, the Duke, regarded her calmly. "I presented myself honestly as Richard Ashworth. It is my name. You allowed me to believe you were a colonial businessman of modest standing. I never claimed to be of modest standing. You assumed. Because you deliberately cultivated that impression." Her hands were shaking with fury. "You let me bargain for my sister's future as if I were negotiating with a shopkeeper, not one of the wealthiest men in England." A hint of anger finally showed in his eyes. "Would you have preferred I announce my title immediately? Good evening, Miss Covington. I am the Duke of Northcote, and I wish to purchase you as my Duchess. Would that have been less humiliating? I would have preferred honesty." Honesty. He laughed without humor. "Every unmarried woman in London would have accepted my proposal instantly, not for me, but for this." He gestured around them at the opulence of the room. "I wanted a wife who would accept me without the trappings of title and wealth. So this was a test? One I evidently failed by accepting your proposal." "On the contrary." His voice softened slightly. "You negotiated terms that protected your dignity and your sister's welfare. You didn't simper or flatter. You treated our marriage as exactly what I presented it to be, our practical arrangement between equals." "But we are not equals," Zara said bitterly. "You are the Duke of Northcote, and I am nobody." "You are the Duchess of Northcote," he corrected. "And that makes you one of the most powerful women in England." She sank onto a delicate chair, suddenly exhausted. "Why me? With your title, you could have married anyone, a beautiful young debutante, a foreign princess. I chose you for exactly the reasons I stated." He moved to stand before her. "Intelligence. Resilience. Practicality. The title needs those qualities, especially now." "What do you mean, especially now?" He hesitated. "My succession to the dukedom was contested. There are those in society who consider me an usurper. I don't understand. The previous duke died without direct heirs. I was a distant cousin, raised in colonial obscurity. Many expected the title to pass to a closer relation, the Marquis of Halford, a favorite in London society. But the law and the family record supported my claim." His expression darkened. "Halford has made it his mission to undermine me at every turn, spreading rumors about my parentage, questioning my right to the title." Understanding dawned. "And a well-bred wife with impeccable lineage strengthens your position." "Yes." At least he had the grace to look somewhat ashamed. "Though that was not my only motivation." Zara stood abruptly. "I am tired. I wish to retire." "Of course." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I did not lie about wanting a marriage based on mutual respect, Zara. That much was true." "Respect requires trust," she said quietly. "And you have given me no reason to trust you." After he left, Zara sat alone in her new splendor, feeling more adrift than she had even in the depths of her father's financial ruin. She had married a stranger, not merely a stranger, but a duke with unknown motives and secrets. Yet as she prepared for bed in a nightgown far finer than anything she had ever owned, placed there by servants who now answered to her, a small, practical part of her mind acknowledged the truth: whatever his motives, her husband had rescued her and Eleanor from destitution. He had placed her in a position of extraordinary privilege. And if his deceit had wounded her pride, was that not a small price to pay for such security? It was this thought that finally allowed her to sleep, though her dreams were troubled by the image of dark eyes watching her with unreadable intent. The weeks that followed were a bewildering education in her new role. Zara discovered that being a duchess involved far more than fine gowns and formal dinners. The estate employed over 200 people whose livelihoods depended on its prosperity. There were tenant farmers whose concerns required attention, charitable obligations to local villages, and an endless stream of correspondence from peers, politicians, and petitioners. To her surprise, Richard did not exclude her from these responsibilities. Instead, he invited her to join him each morning in the estate office, explaining the complex financial and legal matters that occupied much of his time. The northern collieries need significant investment, he explained one rainy morning, spreading maps across his desk. The previous duke neglected them for decades, and the working conditions are deplorable. Surely improving conditions would reduce profits, Zara observed, repeating what she had often heard her father say about his shipping concerns. Richard's expression hardened. I visited the mines last year. Children as young as 8 working in darkness, men crippled before 40, families living in squalor while generating enormous wealth for this estate. He tapped the map emphatically. Proper ventilation, reduced hours, safe equipment, and decent housing will cost a fortune initially, but healthy workers are more productive workers. Zara studied him with new interest. That's a remarkably progressive view for a duke. A shadow crossed his face. I worked in mines as a boy. My father died in one. The casual revelation stunned her. But how is that possible? You're a duke. My father was the youngest son of the youngest son, cast out for marrying beneath him. He died never knowing his distant connection to a dukedom. Richard straightened the papers before him. I was 14 when a cave-in crushed him. I spent the next decade working my way up from miner to owner. Zara tried to reconcile this history with the aristocrat before her. Then how did you discover your claim to the title? An attorney handling the succession crisis tracked me down in Australia. I had made my fortune by then, but nothing prepared me for returning to England and fighting for a birthright I hadn't known existed. His lips quirked in a humorless smile. London society was less than welcoming to a colonial upstart with coal dust still metaphorically under his fingernails. For the first time, Zara felt a flicker of genuine sympathy for her husband. She tried to imagine him, successful in his own right but suddenly thrust into an aristocratic world with rigid rules and entrenched prejudices. Is that why you need an heir quickly? She asked, the question escaping before she could reconsider it. To secure the succession. His dark eyes met hers. That is one consideration, yes. The air between them seemed to thicken, and Zara found herself acutely aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his shaving soap, the strength evident in his hands as they rested on the desk. I should check on Eleanor, she said quickly, rising. She's still adjusting to country life. That wasn't strictly true. Her sister had blossomed at Ashworth Park, charming the staff and spending hours exploring the extensive grounds. If anything, it was Zara who struggled to adjust, not to the luxury or responsibilities, but to the confusing nature of her relationship with her husband. By day, they worked side by side as cordial partners, discussing estate matters and gradually establishing routines. By night, they maintained their separate chambers, honoring the terms of their arrangement. Yet increasingly, Zara found herself wondering what it might be like if their marriage were real, if the connection they were building extended beyond practicality into something warmer. Such thoughts were dangerous. Richard had been clear about his expectations, and she had accepted them. Emotional entanglement would only complicate their carefully constructed partnership. A fortnight after their arrival, the first test of Zara's new position came in the form of a dinner party. Several neighboring landowners and their wives had requested to meet the new Duchess, and Richard deemed it politically necessary to oblige them. These families hold considerable influence in the county, he explained as Zara reviewed the guest list. Their support, or lack thereof, affects everything from local politics to our ability to implement changes on the estate. Zara nodded, anxiety knotting her stomach. Her experience with formal entertaining had been limited even before her father's financial collapse. I shall endeavor not to embarrass you. Something like tenderness flickered in his expression. That would be impossible. He hesitated, then added, I've asked Mrs. Fleming to assist you with preparations. And the jewel vault is at your disposal. The Northcote diamonds would be appropriate. The jewel vault, as she discovered, was a secure room containing generations of ducal splendor, tiaras, necklaces, bracelets, and rings whose value likely exceeded the annual income of a small nation. The Duchess traditionally wears these for formal occasions, Mrs. Fleming explained, reverently lifting a parure of diamonds and sapphires from its velvet case. His Grace's mother favored them particularly. Zara touched the central sapphire, larger than her thumbnail. His mother? I thought the previous Duke died without direct heirs. The late Duchess was His Grace's great-aunt by marriage, Mrs. Fleming clarified. She passed some years before the old Duke. That evening, dressed in midnight blue silk with the Northcote diamonds at her throat and ears, Zara descended the grand staircase feeling like an imposter. The woman reflected in the hallway mirrors looked like a duchess, regal, confident, magnificent. Inside, she remained Zara Covington, the impoverished gentlewoman playing a part. Richard waited at the foot of the stairs, resplendent in formal evening wear. His eyes widened slightly as she approached, his expression suddenly vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. You look, he began, then seemed to recollect himself. The diamonds suit you. Thank you, she replied, uncertain how to interpret his reaction. Though I fear they're rather wasted on me. On the contrary. He offered his arm. They have been waiting for a worthy duchess. The dinner proceeded more smoothly than Zara had dared hope. The local gentry were less intimidating than London society, and her genuine interest in estate matters earned approving nods from the landowners. Richard, she noticed, watched her with something like pride as she navigated conversations about local concerns and charitable initiatives. It was only when the ladies withdrew after dinner that the true test came. We were all quite astonished by His Grace's sudden marriage, Lady Pemberton, the most influential of the local matrons, remarked with studied casualness. London gossip suggested he was pursuing Lady Caroline Halford. Did it? Zara replied evenly, though her heart quickened. I find London gossip rarely coincides with reality. Still, it must have been a whirlwind courtship. None of us even knew the Duke was acquainted with your family. The best things in life often arrive unexpectedly, don't you find? Zara countered, forcing a smile. Indeed. Lady Pemberton leaned closer, lowering her voice. I should warn you, my dear, that the Marquis of Halford is not one to surrender gracefully. There are whispers that he intends to renew his challenge to your husband's claim. On what grounds? Zara asked, alarm prickling through her composure. The older woman's expression was sympathetic but direct. He alleges discovery of evidence that your husband's father was not, in fact, the legitimate son of his purported father, which would invalidate the entire line of succession. Zara's mind raced. If such a challenge succeeded, Richard would lose everything, title, lands, position. And she would no longer be a duchess, but the wife of a man who had briefly, controversially held a title. Such allegations would require substantial proof, she said carefully. Halford claims to have it. Letters, I believe. Lady Pemberton patted her hand. Forgive me for burdening you with this, but I thought you should be prepared. Halford will be attending the Duke of Montrose's house party next month, as will you and His Grace, I understand. When the gentlemen rejoined them, Zara maintained her composure, but her thoughts were in turmoil. Richard had not mentioned any house party, nor had he spoken of this renewed threat to his position. Once again, she found herself married to a man with secrets, a man who did not trust her with the truth. Later that night, as her lady's maid removed the diamonds and helped her prepare for bed, Zara made a decision. This marriage might have begun as a practical arrangement, but she was now the Duchess of Northcote. If her husband faced threats, she had a right, perhaps even a duty, to know of them. She dismissed her maid, donned a dressing gown over her nightdress, and made her way through the silent corridors to Richard's chambers. She hesitated only briefly before knocking firmly on his door. Richard opened it himself, already in his shirt sleeves, surprise evident on his face. Zara? Is something wrong? We need to talk, she said, with more confidence than she felt. May I come in? He stepped aside wordlessly, allowing her to enter a space she had never seen before, a masculine domain of dark wood and leather, with a fire burning low in the grate. Lady Pemberton mentioned that the Marquis of Halford is renewing his challenge to your title, she said without preamble. Something about letters proving your father's illegitimacy. Richard's expression darkened. Lady Pemberton should be more discreet. While my husband should be more forthcoming, Zara countered. Why didn't you tell me? Because the allegations are false, he replied tersely. Halford is clutching at shadows. If they're false, why did you keep this from me? And why did you not mention we are expected at the Duke of Montrose's house party, where Halford will be present? Richard sighed, gesturing for her to sit. I didn't wish to burden you with these matters so soon after our marriage. That is not your decision to make, Zara said firmly. I am your wife, your Duchess. Whatever threatens you threatens me as well. Something shifted in his gaze, a warming, a softening. You're right, he conceded. I have been protective, perhaps excessively so. Tell me everything, she insisted. No more secrets between us. For a long moment, he studied her face, as if searching for something. Then, seemingly having found it, he began to speak. Halford claims to have discovered correspondence suggesting my grandfather was not my father's true sire, that my grandmother had an affair with a common labourer. His voice was controlled, but Zara could sense the tension beneath it. If proven, it would invalidate my claim entirely. But you said the allegations are false. They are. My grandfather's journals, which I discovered among the estate papers, make it clear that he knew of my birth and acknowledged my father as his son, despite having disowned him for marrying beneath his station. Then why is Halford's challenge concerning? Richard's expression tightened. Because the journals disappeared from the estate safe 3 days ago. Zara gasped. Stolen? By whom? I suspect one of the staff has been bribed. I've been conducting a discreet investigation. And the Montrose house party? A political necessity. Montrose holds significant influence in the House of Lords. If Halford convinces him of these allegations, other peers will follow his lead. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of vulnerability. The title itself matters little to me, but the estate, the mines, the tenants, the reforms I've begun, those matter greatly. Zara considered his words carefully. We must retrieve the journals before Halford can destroy them. We? Yes, we. She straightened her spine. I did not ask to be a duchess, but since I am one, I will defend our position. Our position. The words hung between them, changing something fundamental in their relationship. Why? Richard asked softly. This was to be a marriage of convenience, nothing more. You owe me no loyalty beyond what our contract specified. Perhaps I've discovered that contracts don't encompass the full complexity of marriage, Zara replied, surprising herself with her honesty. Or perhaps I simply despise injustice. The smile that spread across his face transformed him, softening the severe lines and lighting his dark eyes. You continue to surprise me, Duchess. Good, she said, rising to her feet. Now tell me about the staff member you suspect, and what evidence you have. As Richard outlined his suspicions, centered on a newly hired footman with unexplained absences, Zara felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time in her life, she was not merely surviving circumstances but actively shaping them. And for the first time in their marriage, she and Richard were truly partners, united against a common threat. When she finally returned to her chambers hours later, a plan taking shape between them, Zara realized something else had changed. She was no longer thinking of ways to maintain distance from her husband, but of ways to draw closer. The Duke of Montrose's country estate blazed with lights as carriages deposited England's elite at its entrance. Zara, resplendent in emerald velvet and the Northcote emeralds, kept her gloved hand firmly on Richard's arm as they ascended the steps. Remember, he murmured, Halford will be watching for any sign of discord between us. Then he will be disappointed, she replied, smiling up at her husband with practiced adoration. Their plan was simple but precarious. Through careful investigation, they had determined that the missing journals had likely been passed to Halford's personal secretary, Mr. Winters, who would bring them to the house party for his master to reveal at the most damaging moment. "Your Graces," the Duke of Montrose greeted them warmly at the entrance, a portly man whose political influence belied his jovial appearance. "What an unexpected pleasure to have the reclusive Duke of Northcote join us at last, and with his new Duchess. London has been abuzz with curiosity." "London must find new subjects for its gossip," Richard replied smoothly. "My wife prefers the honest air of the north to the smokestacks of rumour in the capital." Montrose laughed appreciatively, but Zara caught the calculating assessment in his eyes. He was taking their measure, determining whether to align himself with Richard or Halford in the coming confrontation. The gathering was smaller than Zara had expected, perhaps 30 guests, all of significant social or political standing. She identified Halford immediately, a handsome man of about 40, with the confident bearing of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. Beside him stood a slender young woman whose resemblance marked her as his sister, Lady Caroline. "So that's the woman society expected you to marry," Zara murmured as they moved away from Montrose. Richard followed her gaze. Caroline Halford would have been a politically advantageous match, but she made her disdain for my colonial background quite clear when we were introduced. "Her loss," Zara said lightly, though something that felt suspiciously like jealousy flickered through her. Throughout dinner, Zara felt Halford's gaze upon them, assessing, measuring. She responded by appearing utterly devoted to her husband, leaning close when he spoke, laughing warmly at his observations, touching his arm with apparent affection. To her surprise, Richard matched her performance, his eyes softening when they met hers, his hand occasionally covering hers on the table. It was only an act, she reminded herself firmly. A necessary deception to present a united front. Later, as the ladies withdrew to the drawing room, Lady Caroline Halford approached her directly. "Duchess," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold, "you must tell us how you accomplished what all of London failed to do, capturing the elusive Duke of Northcote." Several nearby women tittered, clearly anticipating Zara's discomfort. "There was no capture involved, Lady Caroline," Zara replied evenly. "Merely the recognition of compatible souls." "How romantic," Caroline replied, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Though one wonders if souls are truly what interests men like the Duke. His background is so practical, after all." The implied insult was clear. Richard had married for social advancement, not love, and Zara was merely a convenient vehicle for his ambitions. "I find practicality an admirable quality," Zara countered, maintaining her composure. "It suggests a mind unclouded by illusion or entitlement." Caroline's smile tightened. "Indeed. Well, I wish you joy in your practical arrangement. Though you may wish to prepare yourself for certain revelations in the coming days." "I look forward to them," Zara said, meeting the other woman's gaze directly. Truth benefits those with nothing to hide. When the gentleman joined them later, Zara immediately noted the triumphant gleam in Halford's eye as he conversed with Montrose. Richard saw it too, his body tensing almost imperceptibly beside her. "He's planning something for tomorrow," Richard murmured as they prepared to retire for the night. Winters was seen entering Montrose's study earlier. "Then we proceed as planned," Zara whispered back. Their chambers at Montrose's estate were adjoining but separate, a common arrangement for aristocratic couples. After her lady's maid departed, Zara waited half an hour, then silently opened the connecting door. Richard was waiting, already dressed in dark clothing suitable for their nocturnal mission. "Are you certain you wish to do this?" he asked, his voice low. "If we're discovered, we won't be," Zara interrupted, tying her dark dressing gown more securely. "I've spent the evening charming information from Montrose's housekeeper about the staff routines and building layout." Richard's expression softened unexpectedly. "You are remarkable, Zara Ashworth." The use of his family name rather than his title sent a curious warmth through her. "Save your admiration for when we've succeeded. Winter's room is in the east wing, second floor." Moving through the silent house was terrifying yet exhilarating. Zara led the way, having memorized the servant passages and timing of the night watch. They encountered one drowsy footman, but the sound of their approach gave them enough warning to conceal themselves in an alcove until he passed. "Here," Zara whispered when they reached Winter's door. Richard produced a slim tool from his pocket. At her raised eyebrow, he smiled faintly. Mining camps aren't known for their security. Some skills prove unexpectedly useful. The lock yielded quickly to his practiced hands. Inside, the secretary's chamber was sparse but neat, with a traveling case at the foot of the bed and a writing desk in the corner. "The journals won't be in plain sight," Richard murmured, moving to the desk while Zara examined the traveling case. It was Zara who found them, carefully wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of the case beneath neatly folded shirts. "Richard," she whispered, holding up the small leather-bound books. "These match your description." He was at her side in an instant, taking the journals with reverent hands. "Yes," he confirmed after examining them briefly. "My grandfather's handwriting." "We should go," Zara urged, suddenly aware of how vulnerable they were. They had just reached the door when footsteps sounded in the corridor outside, steady, purposeful steps approaching Winter's room. "The connecting bathroom," Richard whispered, pulling Zara toward a small door she hadn't noticed. They slipped through just as the main door opened. Through the crack, Zara could see Winters entering, followed by the Marquis of Halford himself. "You're certain the journals were secure?" Halford demanded without preamble. "Yes, my lord." Winters moved toward the traveling case. "I checked them before dinner." Zara held her breath as the secretary opened the case, his movements becoming increasingly frantic as he searched through his belongings. "They're gone," he finally said, his face ashen. Halford's expression contorted with fury. "You fool! Without those journals, we have nothing but unsubstantiated rumors. Montrose won't risk his standing on rumors alone. Perhaps one of the maids." Silence. Halford paced the small room. "This changes nothing. We proceed as planned tomorrow. Montrose has already agreed to give me the floor after breakfast. I'll present what evidence we have and suggest the journals were stolen by Northcote himself, proof of his guilt." "But my lord, without documentation," I said. Silence. Halford snapped. "This colonial usurper will not retain what rightfully belongs to me. If evidence won't remove him, other methods will be found." The naked threat in his voice chilled Zara to the bone. This was no longer merely about title and position, Halford's obsession had taken a darker turn. After they departed, Zara and Richard made their way back to their chambers in tense silence. Only when they were safely inside with the door locked did she speak. "He threatened you," she said, her voice shaking. "Directly threatened you." Richard placed the journals carefully on a table. "Halford's desperation makes him dangerous." "We must leave immediately," Zara insisted. "Return to Ashworth Park where we have loyal staff. Protection, no." Richard's voice was firm. "Running would only confirm suspicion. We must face Halford directly, tomorrow, when he makes his accusation." "But he's planning to accuse you of stealing the very evidence that proves your legitimacy." "Yes," Richard agreed, "which is why we must be ready with a countermove." He studied her face intently. "I will understand if you wish to distance yourself from this confrontation." Zara straightened her spine. "I am the Duchess of Northcote. My place is at your side." Something shifted in his expression, a tenderness that made her heart beat faster. "When I asked you to marry me, I had no idea what a formidable ally I was gaining." "Nor did I," she admitted softly. "I thought I was accepting a business arrangement, not this." The word encompassed everything that had grown between them: trust, partnership, and something warmer that neither had anticipated. Richard took her hand, his touch sending electricity through her. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Zara, know that marrying you is the one decision in my life I have never questioned." She should return to her room, Zara knew. Their plan for the morning required clear heads and careful strategy. Yet she found herself unwilling to break this fragile new connection between them. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Yes," he agreed, though his eyes said otherwise. Neither moved. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. "Richard," she began, not certain what she meant to say. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt nothing like their practiced public affection. This was real, achingly, frighteningly real. "Tomorrow," he said softly. "After this is resolved, we will talk about everything." Zara nodded, suddenly unable to trust her voice. She slipped back to her chamber, closing the connecting door with reluctance. As she prepared for bed, her mind raced with preparations for the morning's confrontation, yet her heart was preoccupied with the promise of what might come after. Breakfast at Montrose's estate was a formal affair served in a sunlit room overlooking manicured gardens. Zara, dressed in a morning gown of deep burgundy that lent her courage, entered on Richard's arm, her chin high despite her racing heart. Halford was already seated near their host, his confident smile suggesting a man assured of victory. He nodded to them with mock courtesy as they took their places. Conversation flowed around them, trivial discussions of hunting prospects and weather forecasts that felt surreal given the drama about to unfold. Zara maintained her composure, though she noted Richard's increased vigilance, his gaze constantly tracking Halford's movements. As the meal concluded, the Duke of Montrose cleared his throat. "Before we disperse to the day's activities, the Marquis of Halford has requested a moment of the company's attention regarding a matter of some delicacy." Richard squeezed Zara's hand beneath the table, their signal. She squeezed back, ready. Halford rose, his expression grave. "My lords, ladies, I regret the necessity of raising such an unpleasant topic in this pleasant gathering, but a matter of justice compels me to speak." He paused dramatically, his gaze sweeping the table before settling on Richard. "It has come to my attention that the succession to the Dukedom of Northcote may have been founded on a falsehood. Documentation has recently been discovered suggesting that the current Duke's lineage is not as represented to the College of Arms." A murmur ran through the assembled guests. Montrose's expression grew concerned. "These are serious allegations, Halford," he said. "I presume you have evidence." "I did have," Halford replied, his voice hardening. "Journals written by the late Duke's brother, explicitly acknowledging that his disowned son, the current Duke's father, was in fact the product of an illicit liaison between his wife and a common laborer." "And where are these journals now?" Richard asked calmly, speaking for the first time. Halford's eyes narrowed. "Curiously missing as of last night, Your Grace. One might wonder if someone with much to lose might have arranged their disappearance." "That would indeed be curious," Richard agreed, "particularly since the journals in question have been in my possession for over a year, securely kept in the Ashworth Park archives." Halford's confident smile faltered slightly. "I think not, Northcote. The journals I refer to were discovered among papers recently sold by a former estate manager." "An interesting claim." Richard's voice remained steady. "Perhaps you'd care to describe these alleged journals? Their binding, for instance, or the handwriting they contain." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Halford's face. He hadn't expected this challenge. "Green leather, with the Northcote crest embossed in gold," he said after a moment's hesitation. The handwriting was quite distinctive, slanted to the right, with unusually formed capital letters. Zara watched Richard carefully. Halford's description was accurate, he had seen the genuine journals. "A fair description," Richard acknowledged, though incomplete. "The genuine journals also contain pressed flowers between certain pages, violets that my grandfather collected during his courtship of my grandmother." He turned to Montrose. "Your Grace, with your permission, I would like my wife to retrieve something from our chambers." Montrose nodded, intrigued by the unfolding drama. "That won't be necessary," came a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Mr. Winters, Halford's secretary, standing there, his face pale but determined. In his hands were the journals, the real journals that Zara and Richard had returned to their hiding place after confirming their authenticity. "Mr. Winters," Halford began, his tone warning, "this is hardly the time." "Forgive me, my lord," the secretary interrupted, his voice shaking but resolute. "But I cannot be party to this deception any longer." He approached the table, placing the journals before Montrose. "These are the journals in question. I removed them from the Duke of Northcote's estate on your orders, my lord, but I cannot allow an innocent man's reputation to be destroyed by falsehood." The room fell silent. Halford's face contorted with rage, while Montrose examined the journals with growing concern. "These appear genuine," Montrose said after a moment. "And far from supporting your allegations, Halford, they explicitly confirm the Duke of Northcote's lineage." He looked up, his expression severe. "You have made grave accusations based on deliberately misrepresented evidence." "Winters is lying," Halford insisted desperately. "Those journals have been altered. By whom?" Richard asked quietly. "The handwriting is consistent throughout, the binding undisturbed. More importantly, additional documentation exists at Ashworth Park confirming my claim, documentation reviewed and authenticated by the College of Arms before the title was granted." Halford's gaze darted around the table, finding no allies among the shocked faces of the other guests. "This is a conspiracy," he began, but Montrose cut him off. "Enough, Halford. You have abused my hospitality and attempted to use my influence to advance a fraudulent claim. I suggest you depart my home immediately." As Halford stormed from the room, Winters remaining tremulously behind, Zara felt Richard's hand close around hers on the table, no longer hidden, but openly claiming her as his partner in this victory. "Your Grace," Montrose addressed Richard, "I owe you an apology for allowing this spectacle to occur under my roof." "No apology needed," Richard replied graciously. "Truth has prevailed, which is all any of us could ask." He rose, drawing Zara with him. "If you'll excuse us, my wife and I will also be departing. We've been away from home long enough." As they left the breakfast room, whispers and speculation erupting behind them, Zara felt lightheaded with relief and something else, pride in what they had accomplished together. What made Winters change his allegiance, she asked as they climbed the stairs to their chambers. "Conscience, perhaps," Richard replied. "Or more likely, fear. We left him a note along with the returned journals, suggesting that harboring stolen property carried significant legal penalties, penalties his master would surely leave him to face alone." "Clever," Zara acknowledged. "Though I cannot believe our plan actually succeeded." Richard's smile was both tender and triumphant. "Our plan succeeded because you were part of it. Your intelligence, your courage." He stopped, turning to face her in the empty corridor. "Zara, last night you said you thought you were accepting a business arrangement, not this. I think it's time we discuss what this has become." Her heart quickened. "Yes. I believe it is." Ashworth Park welcomed them home with a sense of rightness that surprised Zara. When had this grand estate begun to feel like home? Perhaps when she had fought alongside Richard to protect it, not for the title or wealth it represented, but for what it could accomplish under his stewardship. As evening fell, she found herself in the library, running her fingers along leather-bound spines while waiting for Richard. They had agreed to meet after dinner, a private conversation without servants or interruptions. She had changed from her traveling clothes into a simple evening gown of deep blue silk, not for formality's sake, but because she wanted to feel her most confident self for this conversation. "You look beautiful." She turned to find Richard standing in the doorway, his expression so open and vulnerable it made her breath catch. "Thank you," she said softly. "For noticing." He crossed to where she stood, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I have always noticed, Zara. From the first moment I saw you at Lady Hertford's ball, standing apart from the crowd, your dignity intact despite your circumstances. You never said. Our arrangement didn't allow for such admissions." His voice deepened. "But things have changed between us, haven't they?" "Yes," she admitted. "Though I'm not entirely sure what they've changed into." Richard took her hand gently. "When I proposed our marriage, I truly believed that practicality was sufficient, that mutual respect and common purpose could sustain a partnership without deeper attachment." "As did I," Zara agreed. "Love seemed a luxury neither of us required. And now? She met his gaze directly. Now I find myself wondering if perhaps we were both wrong. Something like hope kindled in his dark eyes. What are you saying, Zara? I'm saying that somewhere between your deception and our victory, between the business arrangement and this moment, I have developed feelings that extend far beyond practicality. Her voice wavered slightly. I'm saying that I believe I'm falling in love with you, Richard Ashworth, and it terrifies me. The confession hung between them, reshaping the very air they breathed. Why does it terrify you? He asked softly. Because love has always seemed destructive to me, a force that consumes reason and leaves wreckage in its wake. She thought of her mother, wasting away from heartbreak. I never wanted to be vulnerable to it. Nor did I, Richard admitted. My parents' marriage was built on passion that burned too hot, too fast, leaving my mother widowed young and bitter with it. He stepped closer. But what if there's another kind of love, Zara? One built on the foundation we already have, respect, trust, partnership, but warmed by deeper feeling. Is that what you want? She asked, hardly daring to believe. It's what I already feel, he said simply. I love you, Zara. Not for your lineage or what you bring to my position, but for your mind, your courage, your unflinching honesty. Joy bloomed within her, so intense it was almost painful. When did you know? I suspected it that night you came to my chambers to confront me about Halford, he said, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. I knew it for certain when I saw you standing beside me at breakfast, ready to face whatever came, not because you were obligated but because you had chosen to be there. We are rather good together, Zara observed, a smile tugging at her lips. We are extraordinary together, Richard corrected. Then, with deliberate intent, he raised his free hand to cup her cheek. May I kiss you, Duchess? Not as part of our arrangement, but as a beginning. In answer, Zara closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his with a certainty that surprised them both. His arms encircled her, drawing her against him as the kiss deepened, expressing everything words had failed to capture. When they finally drew apart, breathless and smiling, Richard rested his forehead against hers. I believe we need to renegotiate the terms of our marriage. Do we? Zara asked, her arms still around his neck. Indeed. The separate bedchambers clause, in particular, seems unnecessarily restrictive. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I'm open to amendments. His expression grew serious again. I want you to know that nothing else changes. Your independence, your role in managing the estate, those remain as agreed. I know, she said, touched by his reassurance. That's why I can trust this feeling between us. You've never asked me to be less than I am. I only ever wanted you to be exactly who you are, Richard said. The woman who married a supposedly penniless stranger and then fought like a lioness to protect his dukedom. Well, Zara replied with mock severity, the stranger in question might have mentioned the dukedom earlier. And missed the pleasure of seeing your face when the butler addressed you as your grace? Never. His smile faded into something more earnest. In truth, I needed to know that you would accept me without the title, that at least one person in my life valued Richard Ashworth, not the Duke of Northcote. I value both, Zara assured him. But I love the man, not the title. As he drew her into another kiss, deeper and more urgent than the first, Zara marveled at how thoroughly her beliefs had transformed. She had entered this marriage convinced that love was a danger to be avoided, that security came only through practical arrangements and emotional distance. Instead, she had discovered that true security came from the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to love. And in loving Richard, the complicated, principled man behind the ducal title, she had found not weakness, but a strength greater than any she had known before. Later, much later, as they lay entwined in what would no longer be just his bedchamber but theirs, Richard traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. Are you happy, Zara? He asked softly. She considered the question seriously. Yes, she answered finally. Not because of the title or wealth or position, but because we built something true from deception, something strong from necessity. From a business arrangement to love, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Perhaps we are not so practical after all. On the contrary, Zara replied, nestling closer into his embrace. I think loving you may be the most practical decision I've ever made.